It's funny. I was thinking, what would be the most fun thing to talk to Tyler about? Because we got to catch up in person not that long ago,
Yep,
and
yep,
it had been a really long time before that. But as you
yeah.
know, my interviewer part of the brain's making this big long list of questions and thinking, oh, Tyler'd be a good one to talk to about this, or oh, he'd have good insight about that. But what I really want to know is if you were in charge of the Star Wars franchise, what direction would you take it next? I'm like, that's probably one of the most important things we could hear
I
from
mean, how
you.
much time do we have for this interview?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, we got 3 days. It's fine.
Okay, good. I mean, because I can fill it up. I mean, absolutely not thrilled with the direction they have gone, but I do have thoughts. I think they've definitely improved over, since Favreau and Filoni have been really taking it over with TV shows. That's all right up my alley. Everything they're doing is I love it. So, but again, I'm a true Star Wars fan. Any Star Wars is good Star Wars. I'm happy to have it. I might not love it. I don't love what they did with Luke, but I'm great. I'm great to get the content, so I'm happy with it.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know what they've got in the pipeline coming up next, but I'll be curious. It seems like there has been a positive trajectory in recent years.
I think so. I think so. No, I've got three dogs and Luke, Leia, and Ahsoka, so I'm a huge fan. The Ahsoka show I've absolutely loved. I think that's
Oh,
been great. I really like the characters, and having all the Clone Wars characters that they've kind of brought into live action. I think that's just really awesome. I like them like bringing in all that content, kind of like bringing it to live action and kind of making it relevant again. Even like I think Darth Maul's going to get like a little series coming up soon, so like
oh
it's
wow.
cool to have some of the stuff that that thread. I think that's always been the cool thing about Star Wars, that kind of continuous thread they've had through all the franchises, all the stories is real important. So kind of keeping that going is really cool.
Exactly. It's a robust
Yeah,
universe. I haven't seen the
yeah,
Ahsoka yet. I need to do that.
it's pretty
Yeah.
good,
And they
pretty
bring in
good.
a bunch of stuff from the animated Clone Wars.
Yeah, they brought in the
Oh,
they brought in some flashbacks. They've had like young Ahsoka and Anakin, like kind of some flashbacks of them when they were fighting, and they've got from the Rebels animated show, like all those characters. They brought those into it as well, so that's really cool. And I kind of went. That was I think a lot of that was kind of going on maybe while I was in Japan. I can't even remember when that came out now. Maybe that's been I guess more recent, but I kind of watched all that as it came out, so kind of
oh,
fell in
nice.
love with those characters, from the get go. So that's been really cool.
It's funny. It turns out that Lauren's major entree to the Star Wars universe has been Grogu.
Oh, really? So many people. There's a whole new generation now that's kind of the kids. That's what they'll grow up with, and I think it's awesome. I mean, it's so cool that it's still captivating the audience to this day. I love that.
Exactly. I'm just curious what's the next grown-up Star Wars stuff going to end up looking like?
I don't. I wish they, to be honest, I think they should get like a rated R Star Wars, so we get some really good blood and some just kind of some real good violence. But it's Disney. Disney will never do that, so we can only hope.
Yeah, exactly. Though
Yeah.
that does open up some interesting creative possibilities.
I could say Tarantino and Star Wars. You could like fuse my
Oh
two favorite
gosh.
things of all time. Like that would be so great.
All right, excellent.
uh,
And it's funny because the other thing that came to mind is, would you have had any idea 15 years ago what your life like? What would you think of your life, 15 years ago? Like, would you have any clue that it would look like this? And what do you think you would even think of your life today?
oh man, I don't. That's a good question. I don't know. Like it's no, I would have never thought about it. I guess when I kind of first met you, first met Bonsai. That was right after I kind of got out of college,
Yeah.
and when I graduated, University of Tennessee philosophy degree, graduated in 2008. So we had the Great Recession, and that's kind of what really set my path off, because there was no path. Anything
Right.
that I had already at that point thought about doing just kind of got stuck. So it was just like wide open, and
Because all
that
those
was the
lucrative
time.
philosophy jobs just
Yeah,
dried up, I guess.
they
Yeah.
just dried up. I mean, nobody was hiring philosophers anymore. I mean, it's probably a good, couple hundred years, void of good philosophers. But I was ready and ready to go. But yeah, no, there was nothing out there for me. You could get into teaching or writing books, and that just really didn't interest me. Honestly, with the philosophy, it was just the talking and discussing and thinking is why I really enjoyed that. And I really honestly had no idea where I was going to go with it. And, it was basically just get a degree and get out, and then the world's your oyster. But that was not the case for me then. So yeah, I don't. At that time, it just kind of sometimes I think it's best you just kind of let life do you, and you'll just kind of follow along. And that's what I did. And that just, it snowballed from, a little old bonsai in my house in college that my mom got me to, being a professional at it. How that happened, it kind of just snowballed.
I mean, that wasn't over a long period of time either, was it?
No, it was interesting because what was that, 2008, I graduated, and it was right in that fall of 2007, which I remember it was a Brussels brochure that came in the mail. And I was just, reading through the brochure and kind of circling all the trees that I wanted. Looking back on it now, those are just pictures. There are a zillion of that exact same little Zelkova or whatever. And I was circling like, oh, I want this one, I want this one. And and then from there to about a year, probably about a year and a half to when I really started working with Boone. And that was really quick. And then from, working with Boone, I think I took maybe 6 or 7 sessions, maybe 6 sessions with him of his intensives before I was, next step over in Japan. So between, 2000, really the fall of 2009 to, or 8 and 9 to 2011. I mean, that was pretty quick from not knowing a single thing to being in Japan. It was pretty quick path for me.
Yeah. I can't think of anyone else who kind of skipped through that early phase faster than you did.
It was pretty, I'm really lucky, I think, in that, that's, with seeing people that I work with often who have been doing it for years and years and years, there's often this kind of, bit of knowledge or habits or things. It's like, okay, we need to forget about that and transition to, whatever I'm teaching or what people are teaching. And I kind of didn't have any of that. It was all fresh. And then really from the beginning, it was kind of the correct information. And there was a brief period of where I was, going to Home Depot, getting turfus. I was getting lava crushing up, getting pine bark crushing up, making my own little soil, and to really quickly finding out, oh no, there's bonsai soil, and that's what I should be using. And so that was that little bit of I would say bad knowledge. There was not much of it I had to forget before I was on the right road, luckily.
Because I remember when we first met, you were at Boone's it was probably right after an intensive, very close to when you headed off to Japan, and you were spending kind of a bonus week at Boone's house. And was it Morton's juniper you were wiring? It was a big juniper you were working on, if I recall.
I think it was one of Morton's junipers, yeah.
Big and California. That was like a week-long wiring project, and you were just kind of going for it.
I remember at one point it was during that time Boone had given me also, I think there was a pine. Maybe it was a juniper. I can't remember now.
I think it was a pine actually as well. That does ring a bell.
I had stayed up, and this was actually when Boone was in the Hayward house.
Yep.
And I was out, had the nice little studio right behind the house, and I was out there working, and I actually ended up working on that tree all night long. I think I stayed up all night until maybe 1 hour of sleep in the morning, because the next day can't remember exactly what was going on, but I was either leaving the next day or it was a deadline. I was like, I got to be done with it. And I was, dedicated to getting it finished. And I remember the night before that, Peter actually came by and, took me out to eat and kind of hanging out with him for a little bit. And, I was getting to know him, but yeah, that was a crazy night. That was my first all-nighter, I think, of bonsai, with a deadline type thing. But I got it done. I think he was pretty satisfied with it.
Well, you saved him from wiring it all, so he was probably thrilled.
Exactly. I'm sure he makes money on that too. So I made him some money.
Well, if only by just saving him the time,
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And so it's funny is if you fast forward just a couple months later, you landed in Japan, and you're like, oh, how long was it before you thought, wait, why am I here? How did I end up here? Like, what happened?
With that was interesting always, because it was a November session that I was working out at Boone's, mm-hmm. And before that, I had made a month or two before that, I had made my mind up that I wanted to do bonsai full time, and I knew that you had to go through an apprenticeship to kind of really learn bonsai. So I had worked up a speech and a story and kind of a plan that I was going to tell Boone, like, hey, take me on. I want to be your apprentice. And that was that session that, I was going to ask him. Lo and behold, I did ask him. I remember it was an intensive, breaking for lunch, and, people were kind of walking around the yard, and Boone sitting down with me working on a tree. And I was like, all right, here we go. So I, kind of spewed my story to him and said, this is what I want to do. blah, blah, blah. Take me on as your apprentice. I'm ready to do this. And he just looked at me and said, no, I don't take on apprentices. So that was kind of like, at that, I was like, oh man, I don't know what I'm going to do now. Like this was, I had everything on that. That was kind of my goal. I was like, well, in, the 10 seconds, my mind's racing now. I'm thinking, what do I do? Where do I go? What do I have to do next steps? Oh no, this is crazy. To then Boone saying, Tyler, I don't take apprentices, but I think you could actually do good if you went to Japan and became an apprentice. And up until that point, I had never even really considered going over to Japan.
Wow.
I think, I knew Ryan had been over there. I think he had just gotten back from Japan. I knew of Michael because, of course, Boone talked about him. And I just never really considered like, oh, I could do that.
Well, those were the only people who were back from modern apprenticeships.
Exactly.
I mean, literally, that was it.
So that just never occurred to me. So when he said that, and then actually, kind of thinking parallel, well, Peter's kind of about to do this too. Like, okay, this is a real option. And, of course, me, I'm the type of person I 100% said, all right, let's do it. So it went from, in a probably 30-second period of, oh no, he's not going to take me on, I'm lost, to, okay, I'm going to Japan now in that 30-second period. So that's kind of how I did it.
Life rotates on these very brief and pivotal moments right there.
It really does. It really does. And I think, it's pretty important to always be open to those moments too. And, kind of, in some cases, planning too much can be a little bit of a negative, and you just sometimes need to just say, all right, let's see what happens. And life will take you by the hand and go where it needs to go.
I always like that quote. Plans are worthless. Planning is everything. Going through the exercise of planning is fantastic, but the plan isn't necessarily the important part.
That's exactly right. So
and then you ended up in one of the smaller towns in Japan that's actually anywhere near a train station. And I know that back then, when you arrived at that train station, there were no signs in any Roman characters at all. It was literally a white piece of plywood painted with 2 characters on it, and that was it. Otherwise, you wouldn't even know how to get off this train. And you'd already been on the fast train, then you were on the medium speed train, and it's better now, but back then you were still on a pretty slow local train.
Oh yeah.
Which I remember because I remember seeing the stops. They have these wonderful maps right above the door in all the trains in Japan, pretty much. And so if you can read Japanese, they're incredibly helpful.
Right. If you can read Japanese.
And so I remember a Japanese gentleman was looking up at the sign, and I walked over to him and said, excuse me, do you know which stop Obuse is? And he turned to me and said, oh, I'm visiting from California. I have no idea. We had a good laugh about that. Yeah. But yeah, that's so funny. That's just to set the stage of how small and kind of out of the way place that your new home would be.
Yeah, looking back on it, it's that kind of romanticized story of going to Japan and doing this apprenticeship. Like I guess sometimes other than if the people weren't Japanese, if we weren't speaking Japanese, sometimes I would think like I don't even feel like I'm in Japan because it was just a little country town.
Yeah.
And it's I've been around places around here in North Carolina that feel pretty similar, just a little old town and just kind of the local people. And, you think of Japan, this major, kind of high tech, big city, but I was nowhere near any of that. So it was kind of a weird kind of thought of going all the way over to Japan to kind of be in a place that I'm currently at right now.
Yeah. Primarily agricultural, small towns. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never thought about it like that, but that's
it was a weird thing kind of doing, kind of that story. And, people will ask me, all my old buddies and friends will talk about it. Oh, Japan, you must have loved and sightseeing this and that. I'm like, no, I was just kind of in a country town and stayed there all the time. Really didn't do a whole lot of traveling.
Oh, man. Now, tell us about the very, very interesting character whose garden you were working in.
Oh, Mr. Shinji Suzuki. So it was, it's interesting. I don't know how Boone does it. Obviously, he has, knows a lot of people, professionals in Japan, and how he was able to, some of the people that he's kind of helped get over there, he's placed them often in the perfect place where they need to be, I think. Yeah. And that was kind of the way it was for me with Mr. Suzuki's place. Already he had a good relationship with sending Michael there and having Michael, do good over there. After he left, of course, Matt Real being over there, who Matt and I overlapped for a number of years. So for him to kind of choose that, it worked really well for me because, I guess the kind of the field of, Mr. Suzuki's specialties, his personality, his lifestyle, everything, it just really worked really well for me. I enjoyed it, from the get-go, just kind of connected with him and got along really well. So it's very lucky that, I got to be there and couldn't have been more pleased with that decision by Boone.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned a couple of things that a lot of people won't understand is the lifestyle of the professional you're studying with and the lifestyle and personality of your senpai, your
Yeah.
senior.
Yep.
Those are
Yep.
pretty much the only two things that matter in an apprenticeship. And
Yeah.
for those who don't know, it will range from the person running the apprenticeship might be there all day, every day, like Kimura, for instance,
Yep. Yep.
or on another end of the spectrum, probably would be someone like Suzuki, who's more of an in and out type approach.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's just how he set his business up, set the apprenticeship life up, where, he kind of gives you the keys and it's kind of up to you in a way to figure it out with his assistance. But, he's not going to sit there and look over your shoulder. You do the work to the best of your ability. When he's back, you call him and say, "Hey, how'd I do?" And, depending on the stage of your
Mhm.
apprenticeship, it ranges from, okay, he'll sit down and kind of talk to you, explain, what you've done wrong or what you've done right, what he likes to see, how he sees the tree, to maybe when you're about to be finished, where it's like, okay, good job. He doesn't even look at the tree, just next tree, go on to it. And of course, in his free time, he'd go and look at it and kind of check over it. But at that point, he shouldn't really have to tell you that it's bad, or he shouldn't have to correct you. It should be perfect. You should be seeing the tree the way that he sees it. And now it's move on to the next tree.
How did the teaching look in the beginning? Like, what form did your interactions with them look
So
like
that
that
was,
first year?
of course, I didn't got over there. I did not speak any Japanese at all. Didn't read any Japanese. Still don't read any Japanese. Can speak it like a hillbilly to this day. But so in the very beginning, obviously, Mr. Suzuki doesn't speak any Japanese or any English at all. It's all
Right.
Japanese. He, can do pleasantries, but definitely a different sidetrack story. He does not know the word forest, but I eventually, I don't know if he knows it now, but in the beginning, yeah, it was all Japanese. So when he would teach me, it was often around, Matt would be in the room, my senior Japanese apprentice would be in the room, and my senior Japanese apprentice, he'd spoke pretty good English, so we could communicate pretty well. And of course, Matt, we could speak English. So Suzuki would sit down and kind of describe what he wanted the tree, what work he wanted on the tree. So if it came down to styling, he would kind of, it was a lot of hand gesturing. So he would with his hands kind of show you how kind of the pads should be, the place where they should be, kind of the feeling of it. And of course he's speaking all in Japanese, and I'm trying to pick it up and listen the best I can. So he kind of explained the whole work, and then he would leave. And then I would look over at either Matt or my Japanese senior and be like, okay, I need to do this, 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 and this. And in the beginning, it was kind of like, kind of, you got it right. But then they would re-explain to me what needed to happen. And that evolved to the point where I could start understanding the language better, where I could kind of understand exactly what to do. But, I think Bonsai, one of the interesting things about it is I don't necessarily think you always have to have that language commonality to really understand Bonsai. It's about the feelings, it's about the look, it's a visual art, and that's its language. It's not a English or Japanese language, it's a visual art. So with the feeling of how, somebody describes with their hands, looks at a tree, kind of pulls a branch down and shows things, like I think you can kind of pick it up, like that, very, not easily, but you can pick it up like that. So that's kind of how I, in the beginning, communicated with him.
Well, that makes sense when you think of what learning or teaching approaches worked well for you. It makes you start thinking how so many people are learning today by watching a video, for instance, and
Yeah.
you're just like,
Yeah.
how in the world could you possibly stare at a screen and figure that out where where the person talking on the screen doesn't even know what your tree looks like. And then you've got to figure out how to translate all that, interpret what was done well or poorly in an example, and then apply that example to your own work. It just becomes mind-boggling how you would try to do that, not in person.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it has its benefit and it has its places, but
That's right.
really, you got to be, I think, you got to be in front of a tree, hands on a tree, that's the best way to learn. There's that famous picture of, Kimura's, I believe Kimura did it, where the wire, he had the different color wire over the branch. So you could kind of see how wire
Hmm.
technically should fit up and down a branch perfectly. You could look at
Yep.
that picture all day long, but until you sit down in a tree and realize, one, the branches aren't lined up like that, so that pattern is not going to match unless
Right.
you create it that way. You're never going to learn wiring unless you put wire on a tree and encounter these situations over and over. That's a good guide, but you have to put your hands on the tree.
Yeah, and that's the same guide I'd want to give people as well. And it's like you kind of just have to do it until
Yeah.
it makes sense. And it won't necessarily make sense the first several times you try.
For several years in some cases.
Seriously. Did the apprenticeship, did time seem like it was going by slowly or quickly when you were over
You,
there?
I always, it's interesting. I tried to think about that while I was over there often, and especially after I got back, thinking about that timing of it. And, in the beginning, I think that first year in some cases went by extremely slow, but then extremely fast at the same time. I can remember maybe in the second to third year where it really seemed like it was creeping by. It was,
Mhm.
you really started getting to monotonous life of being an apprentice, and just the days often seemed very similar, very repetitive, and the learning. There's a couple, I guess, times that the learning curve kind of goes up and then flattens out, up and then flattens out. And I think maybe in that the third year, it was a little bit more flat, and you're just kind of building the amount of trees you see, the amount of times you put wire on, and it seems very monotonous. But then I think toward the end, it started getting really faster. When I kind of knew that, okay, this is, I was going to be graduating and heading home, it really did start to speed up. And
Wow.
I do remember times thinking, hey, I need to, kind of step back and also enjoy this and really, especially the time around Mr. Suzuki, it's going to be gone at some point. And, to that point, I think he's developed a very good relationship with all his apprentices. And toward the end, it kind of for at least for with Suzuki and me, it transformed from teacher to more friendship, family, and it's like that time's like, hey, this is going to be gone at some point, and
Hmm.
you start to already miss it before you even leave. So I
Yeah.
remember that the whole time, at times it was quick, at times it was slow, but yeah, at the end it got really quick, pretty fast.
I learned something about apprenticeships from you. And I don't know if you ever heard us talk about it this way, but Kathy Shaner, I think I was one of the first people who did in a full apprenticeship, 5 years, in what
Yeah,
what I think of as kind of the modern American,
right. Yeah,
epoch, you could say. So Kathy went over for 5 years, studied with Yasuo Mitsuya, and came back. And I got to hang out in one of her workshops not long after she got back. So I was one of those extremely lucky few who the very first things I learned were fresh from Japan.
yeah,
And we just thought that's what being a bonsai professional looked like, is what Kathy's life did.
yeah,
Well, and then Boone went over and he did a very alternative approach to the apprenticeship, where there was one solid year and then it was periodic study after that. And then we saw what Boone did and thought, oh, that's a little bit different. So maybe there's a
yeah,
couple different ways you can go to Japan. Well, Michael went over and studied with Suzuki, came back, and his background was very different. His personality was different, as are we all.
yeah,
And we're like, oh, so it can be that way. And so every time someone came back, it broadened what we thought. But for so long, we thought, oh, you get back, you have to travel a lot, then you have to do this. And what it turns out is that actually what happens after the apprenticeship is has far more to do with the person than it does with the experience.
yeah,
Now,
100%, 100%.
yeah. And so the bit that I learned from you is that the experience of the apprenticeship says way more about the person than about the experience. Because we all know some teachers are, and teacher is a generous word in this case.
Yeah, right.
Some people, some of the oyakata, the teachers, the guys you're studying with, some of them don't teach at all, and you
Yeah,
literally have to steal all your technique. Some people will sit down and work with you and literally hold your hand as you go through the process while you speak in English about how to do it. I'm just
yeah,
thinking, say Aichien versus Kimura at two ends of a spectrum.
absolutely.
There are some gardens where you're just wiring every day, tree in, tree out. That would be more like, Bjorn and Kaya's experience, for
Right.
instance. And then I think where you were was its own whole experience. But the thing that was different from you is I heard more humorous stories about the funny parts of being an apprentice, hilarious anecdotes about life in Japan, and just overall, the experience was shared with a smile, whereas most people, it's more post-traumatic stress type anecdotes.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yes, different gardens are totally different, but just knowing the three people that studied in Obuse having had very different experiences, that
Yes, yes.
that you bring yourself wherever you go, and your memories and experiences of that are going to reflect what you bring into it and what you make of it. It seems a lot more.
Yeah, yeah, and that's I guess that's just me. That's just kind of the person I am. I'm always very optimistic. Always
Okay.
seeing the glass half full. Um, Again, that's just me, and I think I would say Suzuki was very similar to that. I think he when you talk about a lot of these other masters, it is very generational for them. This is a thing that their fathers did, that it's been in their family, it's been in their bloodline forever. Whereas with Mr. Suzuki, he was the first generation. This was, he's the first one in his family to have done bonsai. So I think I kind of could, relate to him with that. It wasn't that, that historical drudge that it is for some families or some masters. And, for him, he chose this life. And
Yeah.
same thing for me. I chose it. A lot of these masters, they go into it because their families do it. So
Mhm.
this was a specific choice by him, a very specific choice by me, and I think we could kind of play off each other in that way, and kind of bring similar attitudes and similar love and passion to it, because it is a choice rather than something that you just are gonna do. And I think that's kind of kind of molded who he is, and kind of molded how that apprenticeship ends up, how he treats his apprentices, and that is very different from I would say anywhere else I
Yeah.
experienced or kind of knew in Japan. And I feel I often feel really bad for some of these other apprentices who have done it. Like I love the experience. I had a great time. It was wonderful. And other stories I hear, it was hell. And I'm like, why do you why did you put up with that? And like,
Right.
you obviously must have loved it so much. That's great. But like, who would knowingly go into torture and you're not being forced to be there. You can leave at any time you want
Yep.
during your apprenticeship. I saw apprentices do that. But why would you go through all that if you don't love it? Obviously the opportunity's there, but yeah, I was so lucky. And I look back and I'm like, man, I guess I had a cakewalk compared to some of these guys. We worked our butts off. It was long days. It's a tough life, but I loved every moment of it, and I loved the people that were around me too. So that was great.
Yeah, I know when I was kind of play acting as an apprentice for a couple months that I'd never worked harder in my life, but you kind of couldn't wipe the grin off my face. I mean, my body
Exactly.
was kind of falling apart, but it's like, this is great. Just
And
trying
that's often
to,
the case for the first couple months for most people.
yep.
And often that smile gets wiped off pretty quickly at some point.
Oh,
But for me,
yeah.
it kind of stays on there all the time. Still to
Yeah.
this day, I
Whether it's
think, looking back
repotting or
on
summer, there's going to be a season
it.
that's horrible. And as soon as you
Yeah.
make a big mistake and everyone treats you like absolute dirt,
Yep.
and or you have an injury and are sick and are still working, like any of those
Yep.
things, you're going to wipe that smile off really fast. Or it's like, it's been a week since I last felt my fingers. Should I be concerned about this?
Oh, I remember the was it the norovirus? Um,
Oh,
I got that, and while I was over there, and I just remember, if you know anything about that sickness, it is bad. Like it's just bad.
yeah,
Um,
you don't want that.
and Suzuki was just kind of like, oh, take the day off, I guess, and I hope you feel better. But looking, those are the times it's like, what am I doing? Like I feel like I'm about to die, and it'd be great for medicine or something, but no, just get it out of you and come back when you feel better. Which was like 2 days later, still feeling bad, but it's like, I've been gone for a little bit. I got to get back there.
Did you have many Kohai, younger apprentices who came in behind you towards the end?
Yeah, toward the end, after I guess it was my, I want to say toward the end of the second year. I think that's when the first guy, Yuki, Mr. Suzuki's nephew, who now is
Ah,
actually working with Irasan in the town right beside us. He came in, and he actually started out. He just needed a job, and Suzuki's like, just come work around. We'll make you paint fences and just pull weeds and kind of do manual labor type stuff. Well, after a couple months of him doing that, pretty quickly he saw kind of like what we were doing, working on the trees, and he's like, yeah, I kind of want to do that too. So then, he talked to Suzuki, and Suzuki's like, all right, you can be an apprentice. So then that's when he kind of formally started as my junior, my kohai, and then from there had two different Korean guys that came in. we kind of overlapped for, well, at least one of them we overlapped for, I think, 2.5 years or so. So yeah, kind of during the middle of my apprenticeship, we started getting more and more people coming through. I think that was as Suzuki's garden was growing, just in general, more people getting interested in it. He started accepting more people because he needed the help.
Yeah, it felt like you were in one of those kind of transitional periods where
Yeah,
in the early days he had smaller numbers of apprentices, as you know,
yeah,
Michael goes through in his book. And so let's see, at Michael's time, it was pretty much Michael and his senpai who was less experienced, which was really awkward.
yeah, right. Yeah, Tachi,
Yep.
he was because he was coming from a bonsai background,
Yeah,
so
Sakurai's son.
having him as less experienced, but being the
The
I guess Michael
senior.
being the senior guy, that was, I'm sure, you hear Michael talk about it, and reading his book, obviously, some good stories about their life. But yeah, I think, in those first years, with Michael and Tachi and Matt, it was a little bit more of an intimate, more just kind of a
Yeah.
smaller operation. Even though the trees were there, the garden was there, it changed a lot, over that up until now. But I think that kind of the mentality there was a little bit more kind of low key and
Yeah, the feeling
small
was very
compared.
different. So I
Yeah, yeah.
remember I was a deadbeat. I think I missed the entire time you were there, but I remember I saw
I think you did too.
because we talked about it along the way. It's like, oh yeah, I'll be there. Oh yeah, I'll come. And like it just kept not happening. Stupid jobs getting in the way. But I
Yeah,
remember I
right.
visited when Matt was there
Yeah,
and everything was just super chill, super quiet. And it was the more contemplative sit. It's the more studious feeling. You're just,
yeah,
oh, we're doing our art, we're wiring all day long to the point where fast forward 5, 6 years, and I went after you were done, was my most recent trip over. And it's like there's an army of 5 people from
yeah.
3 different countries. And it was more of a machine. It was like a small
Yes. Oh,
business.
yeah.
And they were just like, we're going to run over here and do this. And oh, so and so might be looking. So we're going to move really fast. And it's just completely
Exactly.
different. But it was the exact same facility. He'd finished building the garden out, which happened over many, many years. He was
Yeah.
still moving around when you were there. I remember he was still adding
Oh, yeah.
sections at the
Yeah.
time, but yeah, it just felt completely different. And but yeah, same teacher, same shtick, but you
Yeah.
had more
100%.
people, and it was just, I think you were there at a really good time.
Yeah, I'm really lucky to kind of, I agree with you 100%. And it was kind of that bridge between, him as a younger professional to what he has built his business to now. I kind of saw a little bit of both parts of that. And still to this day, I go back every year for Kokofu. So kind of see, how things work, how people interact. And it's much different now than when I was there. Not necessarily a good or bad way, just different.
Just
And,
different,
I'm
yeah.
very, very happy to have been in it during that time. I think it was kind of the perfect thing for him, perfect place, perfect time for me.
It feels like the current transition is going to be switching over to see what Hiroaki does now, as he
Yeah,
steps up.
yep, yep. And that was kind of, again, I had he and I, Hiroaki and I, graduated at the same time. We both were that year the only two that received our
Oh wow.
certificates at the same time. And then so that's early spring, and then I left summertime. So I got a little transition period actually with Hiroaki at the same time. It's funny, in the beginning, we graduated. He said, "All right, Kimura," who he said under Mr. Kimura, said, "All right, I'm going back working with my dad." Kimura's kind of, from the story I've heard, Kimura's kind of like, "No, you're not. Like, I still need you here. You're not leaving
I
yet." And it's
remember
kind of like,
that. Yes.
and it was kind of like, no, I am going back. And they ended up working out. So I think he stayed at Kimura's for 2 weeks and would come back to Suzuki's for 2 weeks. So during that last,
Yes, there's that
half
transition
year I was
period.
there, yeah, it was interesting. And I'm so happy I got that because I got to know him a little bit
Yeah.
and get to, try to drag, any information out of him I could about, his experience with Kimura, him as a person, him as Suzuki's son. So that was a real fun time to kind of get to know him. And then, he and I now have a little, we have a little bit of that, relationship together that's, kind of special for me. So it's
I
kind of,
remember
all of Suzuki's family. It's really cool.
that is really neat. I remember how it was described. Apparently, things were extremely awkward at first because it's like you're the boss of one garden, but you're kind of leaving, so you're a short time, and your focus is not at all on that, and so you start losing respect at your garden where you study, and then you just show up and drop in as the son of the teacher
Yep,
where you were, and so no one really fully, you haven't earned your respect there yet either, and
exactly.
respect in the apprentice world is very much earned
Yes. Oh yeah,
as a, and
100%.
on at least two scales, as a human being and for the work you're doing,
That's right.
because people are very sensitive about both of those, I'd say.
Oh,
And I'm
absolutely,
just
absolutely.
thinking, like, you don't hear these stories a lot, but there are these really interesting dynamics at these gardens that, for good
Yeah,
reason, it doesn't come up a whole lot.
yeah, and it's interesting. I think thinking about that, that respect and kind of, So for me, obviously, as soon as he came back, we graduated at the same time, so we're kind of on the same plane. I think you would, I think, seniority wise, he and I think we feel like we're probably about the same. Graduate at the same time. We're
Mhm.
kind of right there, both under, kind of that Kimura Hamano family, Suzuki family. So we're on the same plane. That that period before I left, while he was there, I would often, I was working on trees. That was, at the end, so I was kind of doing a lot of the main wiring, working trees, styling trees. And after I'd finish, anytime you finish a tree, you always go to Suzuki. All right, Mr. Suzuki, I'm finished. Will you please check my work? Blah blah blah. I would, or my senior, I'd go to Matt. Matt, check my work, and he'd, yeah, and Suzuki, so it's kind of like a little, a whole river that would run down of people checking work. And so when Hiroaki came in, I was like, all right, here I go. I'm gonna, be able to figure out like how can he help me become a
Right.
better artist? And so I'd finish the tree. Oh, Hiroaki, tell me what you think about this. He would, it's, oh, good work, very good work, good work. I'm like, well, criticize it, say something bad or kind of knock it down. He's like, oh, very good work, it just looks great. And it was kind of a little bit frustrating because I was looking for the teaching, I was looking for the,
Yeah, what'd you learn at
kind of,
Kimura's all this
yeah,
time?
help me out, just, kind of give me some of the stuff. And I think out of that sense of respect, he would never, and still to this day, would never say anything bad because it's kind of like, no, I'm not gonna, you don't want to rock that boat. And whereas me, I can take anything anybody throws at me.
We're
So
here
I
to
wouldn't
learn.
mind if he, kind of, said my work's crap or this or that. I would have enjoyed that. That's what I was looking for. So that was kind of a weird experience that, I was hoping to get for, and I had to dig everything, pull everything I could out of him, which was just a little bit, but it was kind of interesting relationship there.
It
Those
feels
those
very
few months.
Japanese, doesn't it?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
To be very demure, to withhold criticism, to maintain the respect of the person you're talking with, and to not
yeah.
put yourself out there because at some level, if you are peers, there might be valid reasons to not see things the way sees
That's
things.
right. That's right. That's right.
But it's
So
also
no, that
interesting
was,
because how
yeah.
much can he critique you without critiquing his dad?
Exactly. And I'm sure that for him had to be a little bit of that issue there. And,
Yeah.
even when during those times when you watching their interaction between each other around the nursery, there was definitely a little bit of that as, Hiroaki wasn't going to necessarily, in my opinion, probably say really what he wanted to say or really what he thought because it's out of, this, it's not his
Yeah.
nursery, it's his dad's nursery. His dad built all this. So, he would, his way often I could see of giving his advice or his critiques or whatever, very just a little bit here and there, just, talking to his dad. And, it was often, he's very quiet compared to if you obviously met both of them. Mr. Suzuki's very outgoing, very friendly, very personable, where Hiraki's a little bit more quiet and reserved. So that kind of was an interesting dynamic between them, seeing that a little
Yeah, it's funny. Dad is gentle but has a sense of
bit.
humor, and the son is quiet. Yeah,
Yeah, right, right.
yeah,
They
that's
still
true.
have a really good sense of fashion, both of them. That's for sure.
If by good sense of fashion you mean long hair, French cuffs, and debatable stripy shirts, yeah,
Designer clothes.
yeah, yeah, it's pretty hilarious. Um, yeah, the apple didn't fall too far there. That's so
Not at all.
funny.
Not at all.
Yeah, these are guys you can recognize when you're walking through a bonsai event in Japan. You will spot father and son. It's pretty great.
Absolutely, absolutely. They look like brothers. Everybody thinks they're brothers, actually.
Suzuki looks so darn young.
Yeah.
Yeah, he barely looks like he's out of college. It's funny.
Right.
The so zooming out a little bit,
Yeah.
one thing that everyone who's studied at Suzuki's Garden will take away from the experience is, I'd say you all have a stronger set of aesthetics than most other people who study in Japan. Everyone learns how to make things kind of the way that their garden makes things, like, Kokaen style, Kimura style,
Yeah,
Central Japan style, whatever it
yeah,
happens to be. But the thinking of bonsai as a high level art where really subtle things matter, um, it seems like you all have a different way of thinking about it because you're all doing the same kinds of stuff, but it feels like the Suzuki graduates think about it differently
yeah,
and you
yeah.
connect it to display differently, to seasonality differently. And I'm wondering, what is it about the experience of studying with Suzuki that kind of imbues the students with this really strong sense of, design, subtlety, excellence? I don't know if we have good words for this stuff.
Yeah, right.
But I know you
No,
know
100.
exactly what I'm talking about.
I know 100%. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
hard really to describe it, but I would say it really goes back. It is. It's very. I think I've never really thought of that question before, thought about that before, but in thinking about it, it's. I do think it has everything to do with, and probably it might be a unique case throughout all of Japanese bonsai history. Is again, Suzuki chose to do this. He wasn't coming from a bonsai background, so I think that really informed all of his teaching, all of his learning, all of his philosophies are very fresh and they're his organic feelings almost.
Hmm.
So it's not necessarily based other than where his training is not based in any other background. So I think he approaches it with this very just fresh set of eyes that he's taking all this knowledge that he's learned and kind of picking the little bits that are important to him, but maybe most other people who have more of a bonsai background don't see that because you're always, you're wiring, you're just styling, you're kind of going through the motions. Where
Hmm.
with him, he's not necessarily going through the motions; he's creating his own motions in a way. And I think if you look at all the guys that studied, Michael, Matt, myself, at least the foreigners, current Americans, we all kind of, I think each one of us kind of have that same like kind of philosophical thinking
Very
outside the
much.
box, and that's why I think 100% it worked well for us there at Suzuki's. But yeah, I think it's just his he'll say it all the time, his love. You got to have that bonsai passion, you got to have the bonsai soul to even do this in the first place. But I think he really harnesses that and really is drawn out all his thoughts is first and foremost through that bonsai soul. So I think that really helps these little, when you're setting a display and you're trying to create a story. In some cases, people want to just kind of put, Lego these pieces into place. Whereas Suzuki, they all have meaning. They all have, you're creating something more. You're creating the story that just doesn't come off just because of the pieces you put in there. It comes off because the way that you actually surround yourself in front of that display, how you
Yeah.
look at it. It's not just the finished display. It's the emotional experience, the physical experience around that display. It really can transform, two of the exact same displays with who you're sitting there with, who built it, who's talking to you about that display.
It became
If
really,
that makes sense. It's
oh,
hard. It's hard to explain.
it does. And it's going to make me want to ask you how that kind of
Yeah.
translates to your work over here, students' work over here. But I know on my first trip to Suzuki's, my impression was really clear that it just struck me, wow, this guy has one of because for those who don't know, it is one of the best gardens in Japan. Best is a hard word, but
Yeah.
it
Right.
is extremely beautiful. If there's such a thing as too tasteful, he would be bordering on that. But it's the architecture, the design, and the
Yeah.
trees. But to just focus on the trees, on my first trip, what I noticed was it appeared that I got the impression that he had one of the best eyes of anyone in Japan.
Mm.
And so having a good eye means recognizing potential in material, the material you select to work with, the project you take on. And so what I noticed was at the time, it was an interesting period at the garden this was when Matt Reel was apprenticing there. And there were a lot of trees that had come from other gardens. And so, oh, that was that famous Kimura tree that got
Yeah.
sick and is now being rebuilt. Oh, that's that famous ume that hadn't been healthy for a long time is being rebuilt. Oh, that was that amazing juniper that was carved and is now being grafted. And so it was one of the broadest and most diverse groups of different species I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was some of the absolute best trees of the species. And it just felt like he would go to garage sales and buy the best chassis in existence, and he would put in however many years was necessary to get them back higher than they even had been at their previous heights. And that's just extremely unique for Japanese gardens. You just don't
Yeah,
see that a lot. You see it to different degrees everywhere, but
yeah. Well, absolutely, and that's it's interesting in going around to the other gardens in Japan. Often is the case is you go into a garden, Daiju-in, and pines, 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 and they're
yeah,
fantastic, wonderful, beautiful trees. I would hate to
and
do
they're
needle
all
pulling there,
pines.
and they're all pines. And I think that's something that when you go to Suzuki's and see, I think if I had to think about it, probably I always say about 60, 70% conifer, 30, 40% deciduous. So he had a well-rounded garden, and there were so many different types, so many different examples, so many
Mm.
different feelings of each one of these trees. So you had the big, heavy, massive, strong pines. You had the very elegant Bunjin, soft pine. So that whole garden, and I think that's him. He's not he doesn't just like a big tree or an elegant tree. He definitely leans much more on the elegant side,
Yeah.
but the whole garden is just filled out with a little bit of everything because I think that's what for him and translates to me. That's what keeps you excited all year long. If you're doing pines, nothing but pines. Summertime, good luck. You're going to be just needle pulling, decandling, and that's it. Wintertime, wiring. Whereas at Suzuki's garden, every single month, every single week, a different tree, a different example of a tree is growing, is extended. Now you got to do a little bit of work on this. Then it's time for the next one. So all year long, there's always some work to be done, and it's on different trees. So yeah, it's interesting how his garden kind of is, in that sense, much different from many other gardens around Japan.
Has that informed your approach, or have you found that
Yeah,
you have your own kind of things you like working with more or
no,
less?
I say, in the end, I will, say this to the day I die, but Suzuki, his goal is always to make you see the trees the way that he sees the trees. So that's how he kind of will teach us. Is
Nice.
we want you? He wants us to, we got to burn these trees in our eyes so we see them how he sees them, and that's how you create it. So for the most part, I'm going to keep that for the rest of my life because that's what I like. That's how I was taught. That's how I enjoy bonsai. So I think my styling was going to reflect that, and obviously over time it changes and kind of adapts to my own sense. Especially the longer I'm removed from his garden and not being around those trees all the time. But in general, I think building a garden, the trees I want is very diverse. A lot of conifers, a lot of deciduous, a little bit of everything. Big trees, heavy trees, strong trees, elegant trees. I like them all. Big trees, small trees. Now Suzuki didn't have as much shohin as I
Right.
think he probably does now, but so I tend to gravitate to a little bit larger trees in general. But yeah, so everything, I probably intentionally want to build a garden, want to build my style based on what he taught me, what I learned from him, not only to because that's what I like, but to also impress him to show, hey, this is what I've done. This is what you spent all this time teaching me. Now this is what I'm from what you've taught me. This is what I've created, and
Mhm.
hopefully, if anybody in the world I care, well, two people in the world I care about what my trees, what my garden looks like. One's my mom because I love my mom, but then Mr. Suzuki, I want to have his approval. That's the one person that I
Yeah.
would want to approve of everything. So that's kind of how I go about creating my work, creating my garden.
And I think that's probably the strongest form of respect for you to say something like that, where this is the person you care about.
Yeah, yeah. So that's and that's just I think probably I don't know why that's the case, but that's just I would think Suzuki probably feels the same way about his his former teacher, and he would want him to look out at his garden, and if anybody cares about how well it looks, it's his master, and I think that's just the kind of the relationship maybe that again Mr. Mano had many other apprentices. Kimura was one of them, and that's I don't know if that's the same in every family or every professional, but for some reason I think Suzuki really gravitates toward that feeling of it's not just buying and selling trees. It's not just a business. This is a family thing, and it's a very soulful thing. Again, it's about your soul, bonsai soul. He has that bonsai soul. It's hard to it's not everybody I think has that necessarily. It's in this business, in this world doing bonsai has that soul. So it's kind of that's when I found that I just that's something I got very attached to.
And so you soulful students of Suzuki all have really, really strong design sense. Is it okay to make trees that look different than that?
No, absolutely not. No, of course it is. It's
Because a lot of different
that's
professionals have
yeah,
very different takes, and especially in the
yeah.
US and Europe, people are going more than an arm's length away from what we would expect to see at a high level show in Japan.
I don't think there's. Sorry about that. Can you hear my dog? Hey, hold on one second. Hey, sorry about that.
The forest has clearly been
Yeah,
disturbed.
absolutely. Yeah, so I think that as far as styling trees, so I again, I go back. I learned Japanese sense, the Japanese aesthetic form of bonsai. How again, Mr. Suzuki sees trees. That's what I like. That's what I want to always create. I would not actively try to go out and change my style. Like I said, I think over time, your natural artistic style kind of changes as again you're away from your master, away from Japanese bonsai in general. Um, but it for me, I enjoy that.
Mhm.
I think there are people actively going out and trying to do something very different than that. And I think without a good solid background of a good foundation of Japanese bonsai, because this is what we're all doing. This bonsai is a Japanese thing. Without a good solid foundation of that, I think it's really hard to do something different, whether intentionally or unintentionally, because you're not being informed by something with a good foundation. So I see people that want to, create this style of tree or do something different, but they don't even know how to create technically, horticulturally, a good just Japanese like bonsai. So
Right.
I find it difficult for people to your art to grow if you don't have a good foundation. Again, you look at what Picasso. He started out with just classical painting. He learned how to paint technically, classically, and over time his style evolved.
Yep.
Goodness gracious, dogs. Hey, chill up. Mom, can you put them down, Papa's room? They're making too much noise. Yeah. Sorry, Jonas. It's a great disturbance in the forest.
Clearly.
It's a mailman. It's a mailman.
Thank goodness you've got the right people on the job to take care of that.
So yeah, I think it's important to have a good solid foundation in bonsai, and then whether you intentionally want to change your style, whether that naturally happens, perfectly fine. And I don't mind people. It's interesting to see, the kind of the way different cultures, American, European, kind of take their design sense. And that's fine. I enjoy seeing that, but you probably in the future will not see that as much from me because I really like that Japanese aesthetic. I like the feeling of what I was taught, and again, I want to always kind of reinforce that, recreate that feeling.
Have your if your customers ever encouraged you to pursue any of those directions with their trees?
No, I think honestly, I think a lot of the customers that end up working with me work with me because I tend to have the style that I have. I don't, there have been times I work with people and they want to do this and that, and I'm perfectly fine to, again, I'm a professional at this. It's their tree. When I'm working with a client, in the end of the day, it's their tree. They're going to be sitting. It's going to be sitting on their bench. They're going to be looking at it every day, not me. So they have to enjoy it. They have to love it. So as we work together in creating, designing, I push as much of my influence as I can for them to accept what they want to. And whether they choose to accept it, whether they choose to go one way or other, perfectly fine, as long as they can kind of understand the foundation, and as long as where they're going is done in a sustainable way, in a thoughtful way. I think that's really, really important. Not just because they want to do something different, or just because they have 100 of the exact same trees. I want to make this one different just to make it different. It's kind of like, well, why do you want to do that? There's more. Again, that gets to that philosophy, gets to that soul of I think what we're doing. And I think that should inform what you're doing.
I think that makes all kinds of sense. I've been kind of juggling around or trying to come up with a hypothesis for all this. And what's actually coming to my mind recently on the topic is one way to think of all of these new, particularly, I'll say domestic design directions
Mm-hmm.
is the material considered, quote, good bonsai in Japan, it's a fairly narrow description. It's like it's trunks with a certain kind of size, shape, and character, and then we'll decorate those trunks with a fairly narrow set of interpretations of what we want to do with the foliage to kind of showcase the character we have in the trunks.
Right. Yeah.
If we are to adhere to those standards, then we have very little good material to work with in the US. Now, there are tons and tons of trunks that have great age and character, but
Yeah.
according to the Japanese eye, it might be wacko shapes, way out of balance, really unusual. And so, whereas it looks like historically those trees have been passed over as not good candidates for bonsai, it's as if a lot of our new design directions are simply a way to take advantage of the material we have to meet the demand of people to play with trees. And so it's like either all of these new directions are a lowering of standards so that we can use trees that are substandard, or we're broadening our understanding of and appreciation of what can be there. And I think depending on if you're a hater or a lover, you're gonna, pick one side of the
Yeah.
argument or the
Yeah.
other. But
Right.
I'm more and more, I've just been wondering, apart from the business aspect of this, because it's really good business to tell people,
Yeah.
oh yeah, these wacko trunks that we all have been throwing away forever, I think you should use all those. That's just good for business,
Yeah.
like for
Right.
literally for the
Absolutely.
buyers, for the
Yep.
sellers, for everybody, and it
Exactly right.
lets
Yep.
more people play bonsai. And so I
Yep.
haven't totally thought that through yet, but that's what's been coming to mind lately. Is it might just be a way of addressing we need more material.
Well, it's
What do
interesting,
you do with it?
yeah, it's interesting. And I think, I think, one thing, I think we actually have some of the best material in the world.
Hmm.
I think some of our, you look at all of our collective stuff, the junipers, the pines that we have, absolutely incredible. I think a lot of them probably better than some of the Japanese trees.
Hmm.
We've seen some amazing trees over here. It's the foliage, it's the problem with it. And it's um, and then going down the next road is we are so young in this country of doing bonsai. They have, these materials, some of these materials that are world class trees in Japan, there probably a time in those bonsai's life that there was a master talking about them like, oh, this isn't a good piece of material, put it to the side, let's move on. 100 years later, that's got 100 years of age of it being grown in a pot, having, generic work done to it. Now it's starting to come along. So I think we're just so young in the United States, this material that we have, and I often tell people, I wish I could be a bonsai professional in America, 100, 200 years down the road when we
Oh
have
man.
all these old things that,
Yeah.
they've been bonsai for a couple hundred years. Our oldest bonsai in the United States are not, not that old at all. So I think that as we kind of start growing as, us in America doing bonsai, as these trees have been bonsai for longer and longer, I think some of those quirky or weird things will start to kind of get edited out, and the tree kind of starts to frame those things better. The tree grows around them. We do different techniques to fix those. So one thing I think we often do is we do have some crazy trees, but I don't know if we really utilize them to the best of our ability. Again,
Right.
talking about, I think one of the biggest difficulties is, our native foliage. It just in with the country being as big as it is, we take a Rocky Mountain juniper from out of its native environment down here to the southeast, and it's a completely different environment. So the growing, the horticulture of them is going to be a lot different, and they don't really love it down here. A lot of humidity, a lot of wetness. They're not used to
Right.
that. So for me, getting better foliage on there is one of the things that I think in a heartbeat can take that so-so piece of material and take it to a world-class piece of material very easily without a whole lot of difficulty. And though that then has to be a bonsai, so grafting different foliage on it, then we have to go through another 10, 15, 20 years of it maturing and growing. So we're just so young in the country that I think we need to, it's really hard for me sometimes when I see a tree that was on the mountain 2 years ago be in a show next year. It's really
Yeah.
hard for me as a professional to say, man, that's not a bonsai yet. Yeah, it's in a pot. Yeah, it's been worked. It's not a bonsai yet. It's getting there, but It's
I
not yet.
struggle with that a lot, is trying to define for people the line at which something is ready to go into a show. And I think I think it's okay that I struggle with it, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
yeah, that's the very first thing I think, looking through, say, submissions for the expo, is
yeah,
it's like, wow, that'll be great in time. But it
yeah,
looks like it's been
exactly.
wired twice, probably
Yeah.
because it's been wired at most twice. But you actually
In its
suggest.
free year of being a bonsai.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just such a rush to just
Yeah,
get them up into that state. And but what that's saying is that what we look for exhibits is that nothing that we do, it's all the natural character of the tree is all that
yeah,
matters, and who cares about our role. Whereas I'm a little more balanced about that. But you suggested something interesting,
yes,
which um, as a tree has been a bonsai for, say, 150 years,
yeah,
and that means someone else is owning it. Every 10 to 50 years, it's going
yeah,
to change hands. Well, maybe a lot of their trees 150 years ago were wacko, and it's those rough edges that, think about
yeah,
it, broke off. Someone bought a tree and put their mark on it. And over time, as you refine, what we're looking at a Japanese exhibit is the culmination of generations of refined practice.
yeah,
And so I think just thinking of it that way tells me that we should probably be a little more open to wacky in this
yes,
country.
yeah,
And I think at the same time, we should keep in mind that it's a moving target, and that just because it's wacky now doesn't mean it will always be wacky, or that maybe we just think about wacky differently.
yeah, yeah. That's it's very interesting, and I think that will be the case over time. Um, as yeah, I'm thinking about like a tree that 100 years ago, maybe 100 years down the road, looking back at it now, and it's like, okay, here's a juniper had this real crazy deadwood. It has this really crazy life vein that goes above and beyond, away from the base of the tree.
Mhm.
Currently, we tend to keep that because that's part of the tree.
The
It's
character,
that's
yeah.
the character. But yeah, you can imagine easily 50 years down the road, go through a hot summer, that branch dies off, and now
Yeah.
that character is gone. So you start honing in that tree closer and closer around really what the soul of the tree is. And I think that, yeah, absolutely, down the road will start to change in some of our trees.
Well, and think about how that lifeline is improving, thickening, and maybe moving down low to where maybe it gets way, way more compelling. And again, over 150 years, how many times has someone changed the front to take advantage of the changes the tree has given us? And
Yeah,
then we redesign it for that. And that simple process is going to refine it and refine it and refine it.
yeah, absolutely. So that's again, I think that all gets back to we are so young in this country of doing bonsai. I think it's a big mistake to try to say this is what this is us as America for bonsai. This is us because we don't even know who we are yet. I mean, we have had just one simple generation of people doing this, so I'm the type of person I don't want to put labels on things. I just let it. What's the point of that? Like, what's the point
Yeah.
of saying this is us? Just do good bonsai, and even in that, what is good bonsai? That's I think it's very person to person, but that's we need to kind of go through some period of that of us as hobbyists and of generations before I think really we can start to define what do our trees look like in this country.
Yeah, it's interesting. I worked in Denver for the first time recently, and I think my big takeaway, so pretty much for the most part, what I looked at were limber pine, ponderosa pine, Rocky Mountain juniper, and Colorado blue spruce.
Yeah,
And like that was 90% of the trees. And my big takeaway was it actually makes me think that we, believe it or not, underappreciate how amazing our collected material is.
oh yeah, yeah,
When you think of, because we see these species, to more or less depending on where you go in the country all the time, but seeing in a community where brand new club members and experienced club members are all working with fresh collected material that ranging in age from 100 years old to closer to 1,000 years old. And I just thought, wow, there's some amazing material here, and it makes me so curious about where we're going to go with all this. How
yeah.
long is it going to be before our techniques catch up and we find out, okay, what are some really productive directions that we can take these trees? Because I actually think we should put even higher value on that collected material because
Oh,
it's
absolutely,
not
absolutely.
always going to be available. And just knowing from Japan and everyone else, like we're not all, these trees are not always going to be there. I mean, just
Yeah,
in the last 40 years, the material you see, the junipers in Japan, you don't see half of the junipers you saw 30 years ago in Japan right
yeah,
now.
yeah,
In
yeah,
fact, and you can see the trends of what kind of deadwood work is popular and what kind of styles are popular. A lot of those trees are gone over there as well.
yeah. It's and that's we are absolutely lucky. And just thinking about what you're saying there is you do have you can have a guy gal come into a club. I've been doing bonsai for less than a year, and already start to work on a tree, collect a tree
Yeah.
that's a couple hundred years old. That that issue right there is also one of the things that can be frustrating as a professional in trying to teach this, when I work with people and they're going to Home Depot to find a little juniper to start out with, and it's like, oh, like that we have such amazing material. And I think we have such amazing material. It's like,
Yeah.
go to that, go to the I'm a collector at heart. I collect all sorts of things, everything you can think of. I think that's one of the reasons I love bonsai so much, collecting the pots, collecting the trees. But when I start collecting something, I'm often going and trying to get the best of the best. And we
Right.
all know, whether it's Pokemon cards, whether it's cars or whatever, like the best of the best, really expensive, really hard to get to afford. But if you start out in that direction, your collection is going to really take a jump start compared to just trying to have the run of the mill things. And I think that's often as a person getting into this hobby, I try to impart on them very quickly is the quality of material is something that's going to really really dictate how much success you have in this, both personal success of how you enjoy it and the physical collection of trees that you have. You
What does
start
that
out with really
conversation look
good.
like when you're
I
working with
think
your
it's
customers? Like how does
yeah, I
that?
think it's one of the things I often try to do is I want people to kind of lead themselves to the answer. I don't want to give out all the answers, because if you just give me the answers to the test, what did you really learn? If you actually study and come to that answer, I think your knowledge is going to be a lot better. So often is the case when I'm working. Say somebody brings in a tree that they got from Home Depot, Lowe's, still in a nursery container. We're going through those first initial steps. Well, it's teaching the important things on technique wise on that piece of material, but at the same time kind of saying, look, this is some of the negative things about it. Look how young it is. Now we can do some things to change that, but look at this, look at that, and then look at this other piece of material that's already really old or really fantastic, and just kind of look at the difference of them. And I think naturally when you do that, people really start to say, okay, I see what qualities in that better piece of material are really valuable and why it's not present here. So I want them to, one, learn techniques, learn information, but also through their sense, like learn, okay, this is really, when we're talking about time is the biggest, currency in bonsai. The time I'm going to put into this tree, it's really only going to get to this level in some cases. So buying that time by starting out with a better piece of material really can accelerate my love and my collection. And I think people really kind of grasp that fairly quickly when they say, yeah, this tree right here, tree B, is 150 years old. It's been around a couple different collections, blah blah blah. This one you just bought from the store. Like, in order to get there, it's going to take a lot of time. It can do that. We can get it there, but understand some of the limitations. One is your life. You only have so many years for that tree to age to
Right.
get to 100 years old. Most of us won't be able to create a tree that's going to eventually be 100 years old and we see it. Most of it is that's for the next generation. So I think having those talks, having that going down that path, that thought path of what is bonsai, what are we doing? I think people often will kind of start understanding that, okay, maybe that's the first stage, I think, of how they improve their eye when they're looking at material.
I like that. And it's really, that's a great example of the kind of thing you can gain working with a professional in that it's one of the most valuable aspects of it is the conversation about how do you develop as a collector? How do you refine your
Yeah,
sense of taste? How do you identify what species or styles you find pleasing to work with?
yeah.
It sounds like guiding people through that process is a big part of what you do with them.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's, that's, I think that's a very important, because, I did the same thing. I had all my past teachers. That's what they did for me. I'm coming from a place of, that's how I was taught. How did Boone teach me that, what a good bonsai looks like? Well, first it was having it in his yard and getting to work on them,
Mhm.
but him fairly quickly saying, this piece of material is maybe something you should not. He did it. I think I come to it in a different feeling than he does, but it's more of pleasantly, this is maybe not the best piece of material. So, whereas
Right.
with Boone, it's no, the bad tree, move along with it. And I don't think always, I think most people, when you let them kind of come to it themselves, I think that's going to stick with them a lot more than just, saying no or yes or no sometimes.
Well, and that's something that really sticks with me is when people ask for that kind of feedback, a lot of professionals just sort of volunteering that feedback. Hey, this is all crap.
Right, right.
But when people actually solicit that kind of feedback and you give it to them, when they're like, oh, awesome, thank you. I'd love to move this thing along, or I'd love to step that up. It's when they respond well to that. Those are the collections that seem to accelerate way, way faster.
Yeah.
If
Oh,
you're
yeah.
open
Yeah.
to that learning and change, so I never thought of that. That's probably one of the single most important things that you see in people's collections who are radically accelerating their quality.
Yeah, yeah. And I always like to tell people there's really two different ways you can do bonsai, and I think you should do both of them. Again, currency, time is the currency, so you can go out and buy that time, or
Mhm.
you can spend that time yourself. I think a good collection is built around both those things. I think you should go out and buy a really great tree, one, so you can have an advanced tree, a good tree that how to do more advanced techniques on it that you can't do on a initially styled tree.
Yes.
But you should also have trees that you should build yourself and kind of grow from the beginning. All of these things are bonsai, but it's that time. You have to understand the currency is time. So there's nothing wrong with going out and buying a tree that somebody's already styled, somebody's already worked on, paying somebody to work on that, because that is in essence what bonsai is. It is about that time. You can't, in order to have a world class collection, time has to be in that collection. And if it's a very short period of time, which is just us starting a tree from the beginning, it's not going to have that time that a collection of trees that are built from, buying trees, old famous trees, old rocky trees, whatever that, that time is already there, So it's that currency of time. And I think to build a good collection, you have to do both of them. You have to go out and buy trees and you have to build trees yourself. There's nothing wrong with either one of them.
So that makes me really happy to hear all of that. I know that for me, great bonsai is the result of the relationship of person and tree over
Yeah.
time. And the I often get blank stares when I try to convey that kind of idea. And it's like, well, I'm looking at the tree. Is it a good tree or not? And it's like, it's a great tree if it shows characteristics that kind of convey what happens when a tree's been cared for by a person over a long time. Otherwise, we're just digging it up off the hill and putting it in a pot. And then we're miniaturists. And so it's whatever that character happens to be, and it'll be different because we're all different and trees are all different. But for me, the relationship you're talking about is a really important part of it. And I sometimes find that that is an idea that doesn't automatically just jump into people's heads. Because when you're new to bonsai, you don't necessarily see time
Yeah. Right. Right.
or
Yeah.
appreciate the
Yeah.
time, and to the point where trees that are 3 years out of the ground are winning prizes and shows. And so
Yeah.
that makes it sound like what I'm trying to convey is even more off base. Well, that tree won the prize. Why'd that win the prize? Like, well, it's
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think, and I encourage people. So that, I think a lot of those issues can be solved by seeing good trees,
yeah.
which is probably, again, one of the toughest things. Us being a young country, we don't have a great historical collection of trees currently that make up our bonsai. You can find it if you go find certain people's gardens, you go see certain collections, you can find hints of that, and that's really important. You know, when you're in Japan going to those gardens, you're going garden after garden after garden, seeing fantastic trees one after another. So that's kind of a negative to us here. But we can, by going out, working with, a professional, by one of the easiest things you can do is every single day sit down and look at a kokofu book, look at
Yeah.
good trees, and that's how I think can start shaping your sense of what that time really looks like. And if you don't do that, it is really hard for people to understand why did that tree, why is that a good bonsai? And that's a tough thing.
What do we learn by looking at pictures of trees? I bought a book. I'm new to bonsai. Oh, look, it's a bunch of green triangles. Cool. They're all shaped like Mount Fuji. Where are we going with this?
Well, I think it's so important because that one of the good things about being an apprentice over there in Japan is every single day, I'm walking through that garden, you're pulling weeds, watering, you're looking at these trees, and you're getting these images burned into your mind of these silhouettes, these branches around these trunks. So what do we learn? Well, you learn that's what those bonsai look like.
Yeah.
So when you sit down in front of your tree that hasn't been styled or needs to be restyled, if you have this whole catalog in your head of what trees should look like, that gives you a very good basis of, all right, this is how I should start working on this tree. So by looking at good bonsai, that's going to inform you to how you should start creating your trees. And again, with this, one of the things is, again, I'm going back to that Japanese aesthetic, that Japanese bonsai. That's what I like. That's what I love. That's why I'm doing this. It's a Japanese word. This is Japanese art, in my opinion, that now the world has started to take over, to take into their own hands. Perfectly fine. But again, that gets back to my foundation is that Japanese look, that Japanese feeling. From that, you can grow and build off of that. But, by looking at those books every day, I think that gives you a very good image of where to start, that then you can mentally look at your tree and start placing some of those images on yours, and that gives you a really good direction of where to start that process.
Which brings me to the last thing that I was wanting to hear about from you today, and
Yep.
that is tell us about bonsai in the Southeast. 1 month from now, we're going to be at the national show in Rochester, New York. A lot of us
Yep.
go up there, and when you love beautiful bonsai, you want to spend as much time around them as possible. And
Yep.
that's why I make the trek to Rochester is to see beautiful trees and to hang out with a whole bunch of people that are as kooky as I am. And so
Yep.
that's a good time. But tell us
Yes.
about the Southeast.
So the Southeast, we are on a really good path. Unfortunately, we lost one of our guys, Bjorn. Just completely dissing me and trying to go back over to Japan. Whatever. Thanks a lot, Bjorn. But no, I think it's really growing. I think we're really since I have been back in the States. I obviously from the people I work with. That's who I most see. The collections I see grow. I think it's getting really, really good. We're starting to get some, really high end, material. Some trees are really starting to develop. Collections are really, really starting to build, and that's really exciting. So I think that there's a lot of really good clubs going on. A lot of people, of course, we went through the pandemic where a hobby boom just took over. I think that gave a huge spur in bonsai in general. You start to see, I think, over the last couple of years that peter out a little bit, and
Mhm.
it's not as strong just because people are getting back to their normal jobs, normal lives. But I think that really did put a good, adrenaline shot into bonsai in general, and then definitely in the southeast. I think that really, got, in my opinion, one of the best growing environments in the
Yeah.
country. You start getting down real south. We still have, where I'm at, North Carolina, still have all four seasons. We get snow in the wintertime, not a ton of snow, but we get all four seasons, and that's what the majority of trees we work with live or love. So I think that's really exciting, and I really think that we're starting to elevate in what Bjorn while he was here teaching, what I try to do, go out teaching. A number of other professionals around here really trying to elevate the art, and I think we're really seeing the not start to, but because it's been happening, not for a while now, but I think we're really starting to see the fruits of all the labor we're putting in. And again, with a lot of these collections I'm working with, they're really starting to turn into pretty fantastic collections, and it's going to get better and better as we go down the road.
I was really impressed. That was my first trip to hang out with the bonsai community in
Yeah.
Atlanta earlier this year. And I got to see the show as well as a number of local collections and was kind of blown away by how much awesome material, how
Yeah,
many dedicated students you have, and just how many people are working, putting in the work to
yeah,
create beautiful collections. And so I don't know that the work has had as much visibility because you're not exactly super close to any high profile
yeah,
events where we can show off a lot of trees. I know you go to the
yeah,
national, as do your clients.
yeah.
But yeah, if we need more events to start showing that off, because
Absolutely. Yeah,
the work is happening and the
yeah.
results are coming in, and it'd be great for more people to realize, oh, look, there's actually a hotbed of activity all across the Southeast, and you've got a number of professionals, a lot of nurseries, and dedicated hobbyists in a lot of states that are
Yeah.
kind of making some awesome trees.
Yeah, and I don't think that's probably thinking about it. One of the big things is we don't have a big show down here to show off. Atlanta does a really good quality show. I think if you were to talk, we got the silhouette show here in the wintertime. If you talk to the people that are here, we know what's kind of going on. We kind of we
Yeah.
through clubs, through smaller club shows, through hanging out with each other, seeing their collections. We really see some pretty fantastic trees, but that doesn't necessarily get shown off around the rest of the country. And that's interesting. That's, probably part of that is because we don't have, necessarily a show, that big congregation like, your show or the national. We don't have that down here in the Southeast. That's something we should probably try to change.
The Winter Silhouette Show is easily the best, at least that I know of, the best regional show in the area. It's not giant in scope, but
Yeah.
it's a fantastic show, and
Yeah.
just seeing who goes to that. I mean, how many professionals will show up at that small show?
Yeah, I mean, it's we've had some good names come through, and it's really Steve Zeisel who's, puts that on. He's done a really good job at building that up
Yeah.
year after year, and it's interesting. Really one of the toughest things with shows is timing. It's all about timing. When is the best time to show these trees off? I think you could probably you're going down this road, I'm sure, with thinking about the timing of your exhibition. When is the best time to see these trees? And I think the answer to that is when they're kind of in their dormant period, when they're just settled in. And that's, of course, why, Kokofu, February, they're just, haven't really woken up from their winter's nap yet. So we get that good kind of Photoshop of them or snapshot of them, kind of when they're looking beautiful. Whereas any other time of the year, kind of, one of the difficult things I think about the National is, the timing of work that has to happen.
Right.
If you're working on a pine tree and trying to show it in September, if you have to decandle it in the middle of summer, it's such a, in my opinion, not a beautiful time to show off a freshly decandled tree when it only has 2-3 months at most to kind of regrow from there. So the timing of the shows is a very difficult thing. So I think that really is one of the big positives that Silhouette Show has is it's honed in there right as the end of the winter or the beginning of the winter time. Trees are starting to actually at that time go to bed, so we get a little bit of that fall color on a lot of things. But you're really the trees kind of it's just that perfect time to show it off. It's not gonna it's not in a growing state. So I think that's when we often like to look at the silhouettes of the trees.
Have I told you that we're moving the expo to January?
I remember we were talking about that, and I remember
Yeah.
you had mentioned that. I didn't know if that happened.
We haven't
yet,
signed the
but
contract yet,
I think
but
that's great. Yeah.
we're definitely lined up. When we had trees driven all the way from Michigan and New York in fall and they still had green leaves, it's like, okay, no, something's got to change. If you can't get fall color in New York in fall, come on.
Exactly. So it's interesting too when we think about, and I kind of have my theories on why this is the case, but most of the club shows that we always have here in the United States, always in the springtime,
Oh my goodness, spring
right
and
when
summer.
these trees are just trying to grow out. We're trying to chop them back into their silhouettes to make them look good. And these trees are like, I've been sleeping all this time. Now I need to grow. And so it's interesting. Again, I think my theory is that we've been asleep all winter time, not doing much with our trees. They wake up in the springtime. We're ready to show them off. We're going to repot them and show them off. I think that's why we like to do that. I would like to see that change a little bit. There's better times in the year, I think, to show the trees, but that comes again with, being around them a lot. When, what your average hobbyist, they don't necessarily know that. They think it's growing and, it's a beautiful time. That's when you want to show it off. And that's just, I think it comes with a little bit of the youth in the hobby, I believe.
Yeah, I think so. And we also have a big part of the country has winters that are so brutal that the trees are just socked away. And
Yeah.
it is a
Yeah.
pretty big challenge to do a show in the middle of winter when people's trees are either
Yeah.
in basements in or buried in snow outdoors
Yeah.
for the entire winter. It's all of a sudden everything needs to get greenhoused otherwise. And so it really gives you these tiny windows
Yeah.
in fall right before everything goes to sleep to do all this work. And then you don't want to be repotting and getting things show ready then. And
Yeah.
that leaves spring. But because things open at different times, it's just really hard. Pretty much you need one or more greenhouses to kind of make that work to show in those awful,
Yeah.
Midwest or Northeast kind of places. But where you
Yeah.
are, you guys can pull that off. I mean, the Winter Silhouette Show is a great example of that.
Yeah. And that's a little bit, as you're talking about that got me to thinking about, just in general as a hobby. And I think there is a level of hobbyist and dedication that you get to that shouldn't be a crazy thought to think about, of having a greenhouse, but that's, in my mind, I was thinking Europe. In Europe, I've been told that when they do a hobby, one hobby, they get in and are dedicated to it. We in the United States, like I said, I'm a collector. I have a ton of different hobbies that I'm into. And that really, kind of starts spreading yourself, your time, your energy, your money, that spreads it thin. And that's something that, I think, it's important to, when you're dedicating with bonsai, a living thing, like the more dedication you can give to it, I think that's going to elevate, your love for it. You're going to elevate everything about it. And that's, I think that is a challenge. Is we have a lot of hobbies. We want to do a lot of stuff. And at certain times of the year, bonsai just is something that we kind of put away and put up until when we're ready to get back to it. And that's kind of a shame sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, understandably. I feel the exact same way. I like that idea a lot. But I think we're also getting there. One of the
Yeah.
things that's made me happiest lately is I'm noticing that regional shows are popping up all over the country, and there's more and more they're homing in on that, fall through early spring time of year. And I think the more examples we can give people of great trees at their best,
Yeah.
the more inspirational that'll be to people. And then hopefully that inspiration will inspire them to
That's
then
right.
do the best that they can and reach out to folks.
That's right. That's right.
So
No, yeah. Yeah.
what
Go
are
ahead.
the what resources do you recommend people check in with in the Southeast? Like there are only so many professionals, gardens, nurseries. Like, do you
Well,
guys
I would
need a
probably,
lot more?
yeah, I think more is always going to be better in this. More trees, more people doing this. That's just more is good, I think, in general. But if you could find, maybe there's a young professional or a guy out there that's just starting up his garden, just starting up his classes at his garden, I'd go search him out and start taking classes with him. Which, I'm doing that, by the way.
Oh, hey, by the way, what is the name of your bonsai studio?
So Dogwood Studios. Yeah, that's something I'm now. Thank you again to Bjorn for just dissing us and leaving us. But so real quick history about my garden, an ad for me, I guess. When I moved back, 2016 until 2020, I just traveled. I was on the road all the time doing bonsai in hopes of building up money, building up the resources to eventually start building a garden. 2020, we moved to a new property, 10 acres, and this is going to be the place where I have been building my garden. So it was, I guess, at the last national when Bjorn decided that he was going to move back to Japan, and up until that point, he was providing a good classes to the Southeast. A lot of my clients have been going up there. A lot of people, a really good source of good bonsai education in person. And there had been a point for me, it was like, all right, I'm going to build my garden. The goal is to eventually get to that point where I can also have classes. So fast forward to when Bjorn says he's leaving, everybody comes up to me, are you having classes? Are you having classes? And at that time, I wasn't necessarily ready to do that, but that has now spurred me with, kind of losing him. It's okay, well, now I guess it's up to me. I'm going to have to start having some classes. There's people out there that want it. And so, coming from Suzuki's garden, where it's just immaculate, the standard is so high, that has always been a tough thing for me is, my garden's nowhere close to that. And I want it to be there. So, I've always been kind of a little bit more resistant of having people come see what I'm doing yet because it's not where I want to. I've had to kind of say, oh, well, don't worry about that. It's more important to start teaching people, to get people working on trees, to teach people. So now I have been, that's been my goal for this year. Started having classes about once a month currently here on the property, and having students come in and kind of, doing that same thing that, Bjorn's done, that Michael's done, that Ryan's done, that Boone's done, that everybody's done here in the Southeast. So that's kind of been, okay, this is what I have to offer, and trying to provide that for the area. And so far, I've had good response. So
That
I'm
must
happy
feel
with it.
fantastic after all these years.
It feels like a lot of work, and it
Building the
is.
garden, but being
Yeah,
able to
yeah,
have people come to you
yeah,
instead of you being on the road all the time.
yeah. Oh, and that's always been the goal. It's just been, when's that right transition? And again, just like I was saying in the beginning, like sometimes life just tells you what to do and you just follow along. And that was a case where it was like, all right, this is just what's going to have to happen. I'm going to have to, just open up the garden and start having people come through. And I've always wanted to, kind of slow down on the travel. So that has helped that a little bit to be at home and be around the family, be around the trees more. And it's been nice.
Have you seen the progress in your own collection over the last 2 years since you've been home more?
Yes, I've definitely seen, in being able to concentrate on my trees and not travel as much. That's always been one of the things, is like kind of, when I'm on the road, for the longest time, up until actually January 1st of this year, was the first time since I've been back that my mom hasn't been watering my garden. She's kept my garden
Wow.
alive and watered it every single day that I'm not here for the last, 10 years. And now this year, just took on an apprentice, and I've got my little brother who's working for me. So I can just see the garden has really just transformed, having the trees here, but to having every last detail, getting those every single weed pool, making sure every time things need to be sprayed, they're sprayed. The garden definitely has transformed in that aspect. And then being around, so I can just say, all right, I'm gonna pull this tree and work on it today. And over the last couple of years, I haven't necessarily concentrated on that as much. So yeah, it's been a big transformation in the garden. It's really really pleasant to see.
That's awesome. And I expect that the growth will really accelerate from here as you have the people on
Yeah,
site to help
that's right.
out and as you stay home more and you and your students can get your hands on those trees.
Yeah.
It should be just fantastic progress.
Yeah, so that's one of the big, the big things now is, I've always kind of kept the collection a little bit smaller, and more manageable for not, for a traveling bonsai artist. So now being at home more, like this spring, just got I think 20 collected trees from the backcountry bonsai guys, and now
Nice.
those things are going to start, getting work, start getting grafted over. Going to do a lot of grafting on them, and so it's exciting to see, the new trees come in and the old trees get better and better. It's fun.
Oh, that's great. That's really going to
Yeah,
pay off, and it
yeah,
goes fast. It'll feel slow
yeah.
for a couple years, then all of a sudden that's always the way with grafting. It feels like you have no progress, no progress, no progress. Hey, that looks good.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've experienced that a little bit with a couple of my clients who we've been doing that as I've been traveling to, I can remember one of my guys out in St. Louis, Tim, going out and collecting trees ourselves. And, that first year or two, putting a couple grafts on to, okay, this is somewhere. I think last time I was there were about two or three that we completely have removed the old foliage off of it, new
Nice.
foliage that has had a styling in it that now actually has a frame around this trunk. It's like,
Oh, nice.
wow, like a couple more years, like that's getting to be a fantastic tree. So it's exciting to see that process.
Are you going to trick Tim into doing another Bonsai Central?
Oh, absolutely. I think I don't know if I can officially say it, but I think they officially are going to be doing. I believe it's 2027. They'll be doing another Bonsai Central, which as much as I can, I try to spur those guys on to doing that
Good.
because I think it's first one was great success, and I think we need that in the country. And a young group of guys pushing that, I think that's absolutely fantastic. I know it's a lot of work and it's tiring for them all, young guys, young families and stuff, but they got to be the guys that do it, I think.
That's fantastic. I was so
Yeah.
excited and was definitely there to offer as much help as I could for the first one, and would really love to see more of that because that's a part of the country that has a ton of excited and
Yeah.
enthusiastic people that'll just go crazy for an event like that. Just yesterday, I heard about a new event that'll be shaping up for next fall, and that is a fruiting and flowering bonsai show scheduled for the fall of 26 up in Michigan.
Oh wow, that's really cool. That's a cool idea. I
It
like that a
is.
lot.
We haven't
Wow.
had that yet, have we?
No, that's a great little like a little niche area of the show. No, that's really cool.
And
That
they're
sounds like a
looking
great
for
idea.
really high-end trees. And
Okay.
I know just within, gosh, is it within the next week or so? I think Julian Sai is going to be, he's coordinating now the Naka Memorial exhibit in Southern
Oh, nice.
California. So there's just this great kind of renaissance of events popping up that are a little bit broader in scope than the basic club show.
Yeah,
And
I
it's,
think that's a great thing.
oh
Well,
man, it's
I'm
so exciting
excited.
to see.
I'm excited, like for you doing your show. You know, the guys out Bonsai Central doing that. I love, to see that happen and support it as much as I can. And I want to know all the things that go wrong with these things. So when the Southeast is ready for that, that big show, it's a you kind of get a jump start on like this is how you do a show because there's, as you know, there's a lot to that, and it's
A
not,
little bit.
I remember telling the guys at Bonsai Central, I was like, there's going to be things that once y'all get done with this show that you didn't even know to think about that first time. That now the second time is going to be a little bit easier because you've already done the base work. Now you kind of know the things to start editing it, and it's going to get better and better and better every year. As well as I'm sure you've done that same thing. So it's real important to we have to have people doing this so it's we know what's wrong and what worked, what didn't work, and that's going to help elevate our shows, and by that aspect, the trees in general, our whole community.
Yeah, that's one of our big goals is just to share as many of our learnings as possible in writing by publishing our budgets. I'm actually working on a revised budget right now so people can see
Okay, nice.
exactly
That's
what
great.
did we spend or not spend on? What was the attendance? What kind of
Yeah.
tickets were popular? Where did people come from? And so with the more information we can share, and then I get just personally talking with people who run events all over the country. I've had a lot of fun talking to some of the folks working on the Lone Star Bonsai Federation's big
Okay. Yeah.
event coming up in Texas. I'll be there in
Nice.
another, oh gosh, that's just next month. That's coming up soon, another 5 weeks or so. But it's great to know that if the less people can suffer through the
Yeah.
mistakes that we've been making, the better.
Yeah.
And I know that now, having done two of the expos, looking forward to the third is. Whereas I was curious in the first one, is it going to work? Are we going to fall on our face? Like, what
Yeah.
horrible
Right.
things are going to happen? This is the first show where, for gosh, almost a year now, all that's been on my mind is what are people going to submit? I'm just really, I'm genuinely curious
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
the show's going to look like. It's like it feels like the infrastructure is going to take care of itself. I mean, I know it's going to be painful amount of work, but
Right.
whatever. That's the work part. I just want to see what trees are going to show up. Like
That's exciting.
these events push the community to dig deep and
Yeah.
see, oh, I can't show that again. What am I going to show? Anyone
Right.
can
Right.
pull something off a shelf for one event, but to start doing two, three, four, then it's like, okay, what is the depth of our collector
Exactly.
community looking like? And so I
That's
have
true. Yeah.
no idea. All I know is a lot of people are taking it really seriously and they're asking
That's.
me weekly, so what are the prize categories going to be? And how do we do that? And when's the submission period? And it's like, yeah, we'll get there. We'll get
We'll
there.
get there. Oh, it's exciting. I know it's a great thing. That's. I think every year, you've been doing bonsai longer than I have, and I'm sure that you've seen just this growth in the United States of us as a community. It's really exciting to be part of that and to see that. And it's exciting to see where that's going to go. Like you're saying, what new trees are out there that we haven't seen. As they get developed and get better and better. That's why we do this. So it's really exciting, and it'd be interesting too. I mean, what if there was some sort of like national organization we could have against us professionals, us as a bonsai community, to kind of help out with that in the way that the Nippon Bonsai Association is, and that's
Yeah.
something we've always talked about. But it's cool to see us grow as a country doing bonsai.
Gosh, I remember you and I talking about that over beers. I won't say how late at night in a patio in a bar in Portland. I don't know how many years ago.
Oh
Oh
my
no,
gosh!
I
Yeah.
know exactly where it was. It was actually at in Washington.
Yep. That's right. Yep. Yep. I remember
We had
that
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 same
show. Yeah.
conversation.
And
That was,
it's interesting. I think about that all the time, and then not at all. But it's the there will be some point where there's something to that I think that could serve the community as a whole. And I guess it seems like maybe we just don't need it right now, but it's too bad.
yeah, what I keep telling people is, great. What benefits would that
Yeah,
organization provide to its members? And I remember that's what I said then, and it's what I keep saying to people is, bring me a list of benefits that organization can provide, and we'll see what the most effective means of providing that'll happen to be. And in the
that's right.
meantime, I just want to do as much as we possibly can informally get people talking to each other. Start with really simple things so we just don't have, we're not stepping on each other's toes and having good events in the same weekends.
Exactly.
And
Right. Right.
that I will just say year over year, 2025 is twice as good as the scheduling for 2024, where there were a lot of events just one after another and or overlapping. And so we're starting to say, okay, Japan's doing this. Someday we'll say Europe's doing that. What are different parts of the country doing? It's starting to feel like we're on the same page a little bit, and we'll just
Yeah.
try to keep getting more and more on the same page as time goes by.
Yeah, I definitely think this is, it when you break it down, this is a regional, as the regions start to kind of really build, or not start, continue to build and grow.
Yeah,
I think as each one of those gets to a different level and a higher level, at some point where it has to, all those things, help the nation as a whole. But it's really concentrating on your community and building that up then helps everything else. It's a nice
that's right.
stepping stone for the whole group of us doing this.
It's funny. The big picture is more of a sum of the work that goes in
Yeah.
locally than all of us suspect. And I keep learning that lesson again and again. And it's like, no, really, like we can only
Yeah.
do the things within arm's reach, and that's going to
Yeah.
be local to some degree.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's so therefore, it's my goal is to do what I can here in the Southeast, and provide the education, provide the trees, the knowledge, share all that, and as we grow, that's just what's gonna continue to make it better and better down here. And I think we are seeing that before me, and I'm sure after me there'll be as long as we keep that attitude of having that bonsai soul, and growing with these trees, I think that's just going to make us better.
On that note, for people who are excited to learn more and or to help out, how should people get in touch with you or learn more?
So again, Dogwood Studios is my business. You can find me on Instagram, on Facebook, Google. Got a website that's got. You can go there and sign up for classes. Just follow the content. That's something as I'm building up my physical location, building up the online content, figuring out where do I stand in this online community, as far as bonsai education, bonsai content. So start out Instagram, Facebook, website. You can find me there, and then Dogwood Studios, nc.com, and check it out there.
And you'll see listings for intensives, and you'll be able to make plans for a visit and see what you got going on.
That's right. That's right.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking today. This has been a
I
blast.
thought we still have like two days to go, don't we?
Oh, that's the parts 2 and 3. Yeah.
Yeah, we got. I got more Star Wars content to talk about.
I was going to say, like, if there's going to be a new season of Ahsoka, we got to cover all the bases here.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jonas, for having me. It's a pleasure to catch up with you and talk to you again.
And we'll do it again before too long.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
The music on today's podcast was brought to you by the fine folks at Blue Dot Sessions. Check them out at www.sessions.blue.